The person you think you are was designed by someone else, not in a conspiracy, not through manipulation, through something far more ordinary and far harder to see. Before you had the language for it, before you knew what a self even was, yours was already being assembled, quietly, piece by piece, without your input. And the unsettling part is not that this happened to you. The unsettling part is that you probably still believe it was your idea. There is a term in developmental psychology for what happened to most of you. It is called identity foreclosure, and no one warned you about it because, from the outside, it looks completely normal. Identity foreclosure is what happens when a person commits to a sense of who they are, a set of values, beliefs, a way of moving through the world without ever having the chance to question whether it was theirs. The commitment happens. The exploration never does. You were raised in a particular house with particular expectations, inside a culture that handed you a script before you could read. And at some point, usually between adolescence and early adulthood, your brain looked at all of it and said, "This is me." It did not say, "Let me check." It did not say, "Let me compare options." It accepted the assembled version and stopped looking. Here is what we are going to look at, the specific mechanism that causes this. The research that proves it is happening in ways you cannot feel. And the particular moment in your history where the door you never knew existed quietly closed. In the 1960s, a psychologist named James Marcia built on the work of Erik Erikson and proposed something specific. That identity does not simply develop, it resolves. And it resolves through one of 4 distinct states. 2 of those states involve exploration, actively trying different values, roles, and beliefs before settling on a direction. 2 do not. Foreclosure is one of the states with no exploration. Marcia found that foreclosed individuals had typically adopted their identities directly from authority figures, parents, institutions, religious communities, and showed almost no curiosity about alternatives, not because they had looked and decided, because they had never looked at all. What Marcia documented was not pathology, it was prevalence. A significant portion of adults reach their 20s in foreclosure and stay there. But here is what the research makes uncomfortable. Foreclosed individuals are often the most confident. They report high self-esteem, low anxiety, and a clear sense of purpose. They are not confused, they are not suffering, which means the warning sign for this condition is not distress, it is certainty. If you have never seriously questioned your politics, your religion, your career, your values, not because you examined them and kept them, but because the question never quite arrived, you may not be grounded. You may be foreclosed, but here is where it gets disturbing. Your brain did not choose your parents' values because it agreed with them. It chose them because it needed a self, urgently, early, with the cognitive equipment of a child. The developmental window when identity is most susceptible runs from roughly age 3 through early adolescence. During this period, your brain is absorbing frameworks for who you are from the people closest to you, not critically, not with reservation, but with the thoroughness of a system that genuinely cannot do otherwise. Researcher Dan McAdams, a narrative psychologist at Northwestern University, has spent decades studying how people construct what he calls the personal narrative, the internal story you carry about who you are, why you are this way, and where you are going. His research found that this story begins forming in childhood and for most people is never fundamentally revised. The core chapters are written early. The rest of your life is spent performing them. McAdams documented something else, the emotional tone of your personal narrative, whether you tend toward contamination sequences, where good things go bad, or redemption sequences, where bad things resolve, is established by adolescence. And it predicts your well-being decades later with disturbing consistency, which means the emotional architecture of your future was laid before you had a single adult experience to learn from. Now hold that thought, because the next part is the one most people do not see coming. The most disorienting aspect of identity foreclosure is not the identity itself. It is the experience of it from the inside. From the inside, it does not feel borrowed. It feels like you. The values feel like your values. The beliefs feel like the result of your thinking. The choices feel chosen. This is not a failure of intelligence. It is a feature of how narrative identity works. The self does not come pre-labeled. It is assembled and then retrospectively authored, meaning your brain produces a version of your history in which your current identity was always the destination. Here is the reframe. You probably believe that you know which parts of yourself are yours and which parts were handed to you. You have thought about this. You have worked on it. But McAdams's research, and Marcia's before it, suggests that the most foundational elements, the ones that feel most obviously true, most self-evidently you, are precisely the ones that were absorbed earliest, before evaluation was even possible. The things you do not question are not the things you have settled. They are the things that were settled for you before you arrived. What would it mean if the beliefs you are most certain about are the ones you had the least say in choosing? You are 31 years old and you have a career that makes sense. It is in the field your parents respected. It pays well. You are good at it. When people ask why you chose it, you have an answer, a story about your interests and your aptitude that is entirely coherent. But if you go back far enough, the interest was not yours first. It was adjacent to something your father cared about, or something your school tracked you into, or something that kept a particular door open and closed all the others before you had any basis for comparison. You did not choose this. You landed in it, and then your brain wrote a story in which you chose it, or this. You are in a relationship with someone who looks in several specific ways like a parent. Not physically in the texture of the dynamic, the same emotional temperature, the same unspoken rules, the same things you do not say. You did not seek familiarity. You sought what felt like neutral ground, but the nervous system does not know what neutral is. It only knows what it was trained on. Or this, and this is the one most people recognize. Someone asks you what you actually want, not what you are working toward, not what you think you should want, what you actually want. And you open your mouth and nothing comes out, not because you are confused in that moment, because the question was never installed. The self that was built for you did not include a mechanism for that question, because the people who built it did not have one either. Marcia identified a state called moratorium, the phase in which a person genuinely questions their identity, holds competing possibilities at once, and lives in the uncomfortable space between who they were told to be and who they might actually choose. It is usually triggered by crisis, a relationship ending, a career collapse, a parent dying, something that destabilizes the foreclosed identity enough that the questions finally have room to enter. Psychologists consider moratorium the necessary precursor to what Marcia called identity achievement, the state in which someone has actually explored and committed, rather than simply committed. Most people avoid it for as long as possible, because moratorium is not comfortable. It does not look like growth from the inside. From the inside, it looks like falling apart. But there is something specific that Marcia's research showed about the people who passed through moratorium and arrived at achieved identity on the other side. They reported not a stronger sense of self, but a quieter one. Less certainty, not more. Less insistence. Less performance. Because the thing about a self you actually chose, after looking, after sitting with the discomfort, after letting some of the borrowed pieces go, is that it does not need to announce itself. It does not need to be defended because it was not inherited. It was arrived at. Most people will not do this, not because they cannot, because the foreclosed self is functional. It works. It gets you through the day, the decade, the life. The question is not whether your borrowed self can carry you. The question is whether it was ever going anywhere you actually wanted to go. So here is what I want you to sit with this week. Think of the belief you are most certain of, the one that feels most obviously, self-evidently true. The one you do not question because questioning it would feel like questioning yourself. Now ask, when did you choose that? Not adopt it, not absorb it. Choose it after having seriously considered something else. If you cannot find the moment, you may not have chosen it at all. What is one thing you always believed about yourself that you have recently started to suspect was never actually yours, and what do you think put it there? The unsettling thing about identity is not that yours might be wrong. It is that wrong is not even the right word for it. The right word is early.